Adara dipped her quill into the inkwell, the quiet scratch of the nib against parchment, the only sound in the small, sunlit room. The salty air drifted in through the open window, carrying the cries of gulls and the distant murmur of fishermen, mending their nets. In the small fishing village where she lived, Adara was known for her piety, her talent with the ink and brush, and a voice that could make ancient verses sing. Her days were filled with the simple rhythms of prayer, calligraphy, and the gentle hush of the waves, but the peace of her world was about to be shattered. Across the vast desert, in a city of glittering gold domes and towering palaces, lived Sheik Rahim. His name was whispered in hushed tones, a legend told to frighten children. They said he was a man of iron, his heart as cold as the desert. Sands, his hand swift to punish. Tales of his ruthlessness echoed across the land, bolstering his power and keeping rival clans at bay. This was the man whose shadow was about to fall upon Adara's quiet life. That afternoon, a dust cloud announced the arrival of riders. They were emissaries from the Sheik's court, their faces grim, their horses weary from the long journey. They came bearing a demand from the tribal council. Sheik Rahim must marry a woman of purity, a woman untouched by the world, to secure a vital alliance. The village elders gathered, their faces etched with worry. Who among them would be offered to this fearsome sheik? Their eyes fell upon Adara. Her reputation for piety and innocence made her the obvious choice. The decision was swift, the decree absolute. Adara, the gentle calligrapher, was to become the bride of the most feared man in the land. The wedding was a whirlwind of silks and gold, a dazzling display of wealth and power that overwhelmed Adara. The Sheik's palace was a labyrinth of ornate chambers and echoing hallways, a world away from her simple village home. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices and the murmur of countless voices. Adara, dressed in a gown of shimmering white, felt like a small boat tossed. On a vast turbulent sea, Sheik Rahim, a tall, imposing figure in flowing robes, remained distant and aloof. His face, framed by a dark beard, was a mask of impassivity. He spoke little, his eyes seeming to hold a deep, unreadable sorrow. The ceremony was grand, the vows exchanged in a language Adara barely understood. She felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. This man, this stranger, was now her husband. The celebration continued late into the night, a dizzying spectacle of music, dance, and feasting. But Adara felt no joy, only a growing sense of isolation. She was a stranger in a strange land, bound to a man she did not know and, truth be told, feared. The next morning, they departed for the Sheik's private island retreat. A small, swift ship carried them across the azure waters, leaving the bustling city behind. The island was a paradise of white sand beaches and swaying palm trees, a place of breathtaking beauty. But the tension between Adara and Rahim remained, a silent barrier between them. They spent the first few days in almost complete silence. Adara would spend her time walking along the shore, the gentle rhythm of the waves a small comfort. Rahim, she noticed, often disappeared for hours at a time, his whereabouts a mystery. One afternoon, Adara wandered further inland, drawn by the sound of a bird's distressed cries. She followed the sound to a secluded grove where she saw Rahim. He was not the fearsome sheik of legend, but a man of unexpected tenderness. In his hands he cradled a small falcon, its wing broken. He spoke to the bird in soft, soothing tones, his touch gentle as he examined the injured wing. Adara watched unseen, her heart filled with a strange mixture of surprise and relief. The ruthless ruler, the man who inspired such fear, was capable of such compassion. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Sky in hues of orange and gold. Adara sat on her balcony, reciting poetry in a low voice. The words, ancient and beautiful, were a balm to her troubled soul. Unbeknownst to her, Rahim was on the balcony below. He heard her voice, the melodic cadence of the verses, and paused. He recognized the poem, a favorite of his own, one he thought no one else knew. He looked up, and their eyes met. For the first time since their wedding, a flicker of something, other than fear and uncertainty, passed between them. A shared love of beauty, a connection forged in the quiet intimacy of the island, had begun to bridge the chasm between them. The days that followed were a slow dance of discovery. Stolen glances across the breakfast table, shared smiles over the beauty of a sunset, quiet conversations about the poetry they both loved. Adara found herself drawn to Rahim's quiet intensity, the sorrow that lingered in his eyes. He, in turn, was captivated by her gentle spirit, her unwavering faith, and the quiet strength that radiated from her. They walked along the beach, the warm sand between their toes, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. Rahim spoke of the island, of the falcons that nested in the cliffs, of the turtles that came ashore to lay their eggs. He showed her hidden coves and secret grottos, places of breathtaking beauty that he held dear. Adara, in turn, shared stories of her village, of the simple life she had led, of the joy she found in her art. She showed him her calligraphy, the delicate strokes of her brush creating intricate patterns and beautiful verses. Rahim, who had a keen appreciation for art, was impressed by her skill and the depth of emotion expressed in her work. One evening, as they sat by a crackling fire under a canopy of stars, Rahim began to speak of his past. He spoke of the burden of leadership, the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders. He hinted at the reasons behind his carefully cultivated ruthlessness, the sacrifices he had made to protect his people and maintain peace in his land. He did not speak of specific acts of cruelty, but of the difficult choices he had been forced to make, the compromises that had hardened his heart. Adara listened intently, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She saw the pain in his eyes, the weariness in his voice. She understood that the fearsome Sheik was not a monster, but a man who had been shaped by circumstance, a man who carried a heavy burden. As the days turned into weeks, the wall between them began to crumble. Rahim's hardened exterior softened. In Adara's presence, he laughed more easily, his eyes losing some of their habitual guardedness. He found himself seeking her company, drawn to her quiet wisdom and unwavering optimism. Adara, too, felt her fear begin to dissipate, replaced by a growing affection for the man she was discovering beneath the mask. She saw his kindness, his intelligence, his deep love for his land and its people. She realized that the tales of his cruelty were just that, tales. The reality was far more complex, far more nuanced. Their connection deepened, fueled by their shared vulnerability, their shared love of beauty, and the growing realization that they had found something precious and unexpected in each other's company. The island, once a symbol of their isolation, became a sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves, away from the pressures of the court and the weight of expectations. The journey to Sheikh Rahim's private island was a blur of blue water and sky. Adara sat on the deck of the small, swift ship, the salt spray on her face, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She glanced at Rahim, who stood at the prow, his tall figure silhouetted against the horizon. He seemed lost in thought, his face unreadable. The island rose from the sea like a jewel, a lush green oasis surrounded by sparkling turquoise waters. As they drew closer, Adara could see white sand beaches fringed with swaying palm trees and the rocky cliffs where, Rahim had told her, falcons made their nests. The island was breathtakingly beautiful, a world away from the bustling city and the oppressive grandeur of the Sheikh's palace. Yet the tension between them remained, a silent barrier that neither seemed able to breach. The Sheik's island retreat was a collection of low, whitewashed buildings nestled amongst the palm trees. It was simple and elegant, a stark contrast to the opulent palace. A small army of servants attended to their every need, but Rahim remained distant, his demeanor unchanged. He would disappear for hours at a time, leaving Adara to explore the island on her own. She walked along the beaches, collected shells, and watched the waves crash against the shore. She found a quiet cove where she could sit and read. The only sound, the gentle lapping of the water and the cries of seabirds. She tried to find solace in the beauty of her surroundings, but the weight of her situation, the uncertainty of her future, continued to weigh on her. One afternoon, Adara was walking near the cliffs when she heard a faint, distressed cry. She followed the sound, pushing through a thicket of trees until she came to a small clearing. There she saw Rahim. He was kneeling on the ground, his back to her. In his hands he held a small falcon, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. He was speaking to the bird in low, soothing tones, his touch gentle as he examined the injured wing. Adara watched, unseen, her heart filled with a mixture of surprise and wonder. This was not the ruthless Sheik of legend, the man who inspired fear in the hearts of his enemies. This was a man of tenderness and compassion, his face softened by concern for a small, injured creature. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Adara sat on her balcony, overlooking the sea. She opened the small book of poetry she had brought with her and began to read aloud, her voice soft and melodic. The words, ancient and beautiful, were a balm to her troubled soul. She did not know that Rahim was on the balcony. Below, enjoying the cool evening air, he heard her voice, the rhythmic cadence of the verses, and paused. He recognized the poem, a favorite of his own, one he had thought no one else knew. He looked up, drawn by the sound of her voice, and their eyes met. For the first time since their arrival on the island, a flicker of something other than fear and uncertainty passed between them. A shared love of beauty, a connection forged in the quiet intimacy of the island, had begun to bridge the chasm between them. Yasir arrived on the island with the midday sun, his arrival announced by the flapping sails of his small, swift boat. He brought with him the scent of the city, a jarring contrast to the peaceful tranquility of the island. He greeted Adara with a courteous bow and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He claimed his visit was to check on the Sheik, to ensure his cousin was settling into married life. But Adara sensed an undercurrent of something else, a subtle tension that she couldn't quite place. Yasir spent the afternoon regaling Adara with stories of the mainland, of courtly intrigues and political maneuvering. He subtly wove into his narratives tales of Rahim's past, reminding her of the Sheik's fearsome reputation. He spoke of Rahim's swift justice, his unwavering resolve, and the harsh punishments he meted out to those who crossed him. "The Sheik is a man of great power, Adara," Yasir said, his voice low and confidential. "But power comes at a price. He has made many enemies, and he has done what he deemed necessary to protect his people. You must understand, he is not a man to be trifled with." He told her of a rebellious tribe that had challenged Rahim's authority, and how the Sheik had crushed their uprising with brutal efficiency. He spoke of a rival Sheik who had plotted against Rahim, and how he had met a swift and merciless end. He painted a picture of a man driven by duty and ambition, a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his power. Adara listened, her heart growing heavy. She remembered the tenderness she had witnessed in Rahim's treatment of the injured. Falcon, the shared love of poetry they had discovered. These stories seemed at odds with the man she had begun to know, the man who had shown her glimpses of vulnerability and kindness. Yasir continued his subtle campaign, planting seeds of doubt in Adara's mind. He hinted at the dangers she faced, being married to such a powerful and ruthless man. He spoke of the intrigues and rivalries that plagued the court, the constant threat of betrayal and violence. "You are a gentle soul, Adara," he said, his voice filled with feigned concern. "This life is not for you. The Sheik's world is a dangerous one, a world of shadows and whispers. You would be safer back in your village, surrounded by the people who love you." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the island, Yasir took his leave. He embraced Adara, his grip lingering a moment too long. "Be careful, Adara," he whispered in her ear. "The Sheik is not what he seems." Adara watched as his boat sailed away, the white sails disappearing into the gathering darkness. A whisper of doubt, planted by Yasir's words, had taken root in her heart. She looked towards the Sheik's quarters, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The image of the kind man she had glimpsed began to blur, overshadowed by the terrifying tales she had just heard. She wondered if she truly knew the man she had married. She wondered if she was safe. Rahim found himself seeking Adara's company more and more. He would wait for her in the mornings, a quiet anticipation in his eyes as she emerged from her chambers. They would share breakfast on the terrace, overlooking the turquoise sea, the silence between them comfortable and companionable. He would find excuses to be near her, joining her on her walks along the beach or sitting beside her as she practiced her calligraphy. He found himself drawn to her gentle spirit, her quiet strength, and the unwavering faith that shone in her eyes. He admired her talent with the ink and brush, the way she could transform simple words into works of art. He would watch her for hours, fascinated by the delicate movements of her hand, the way she breathed life into the parchment with each stroke. Of her brush, Adara, in turn, found herself drawn to Rahim's quiet intensity, the sorrow that lingered in his eyes. She sensed a deep well of sadness within him, a burden he carried with stoic resignation. She saw glimpses of the man beneath the mask, the man who loved the beauty of the island, the man who cared for the injured falcon. They began to share their thoughts and feelings, their conversations growing longer and more intimate. They discovered a shared love of poetry, reciting verses to each other in the quiet of the evenings. Rahim, who had long hidden his passion for art, began to share his own poems with Adara, his voice low and hesitant at first, then gaining confidence as she listened with rapt attention. They spoke of their dreams and aspirations, their fears and insecurities. Adara spoke of her simple life in the village, her love for her family, and her desire to use her art to bring beauty into the world. Rahim spoke of the burden of leadership, the weight of responsibility he carried on his shoulders. He hinted at the difficult choices he had been forced to make, the sacrifices he had endured to protect his people. They walked along the beach, hand in hand, the warm sand between their toes, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. They watched the sunset together, the sky ablaze with color, the air filled with the scent of salt and sea. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the pressures of the world outside. Rahim's hardened exterior began to crack, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. He laughed more easily, his eyes losing some of their habitual guardedness. He touched her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. He began to share his secrets with her, the burdens he had carried for so long. Adara, sensing his vulnerability, offered him her unwavering support and understanding. She listened without judgment, her quiet strength a balm to his troubled soul. She saw the good in him, the man he truly was, beneath the layers of duty and expectation. The island, once a symbol of their isolation, became a sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves, away from the prying eyes of the court and the weight of their respective worlds. In the shared intimacy of their island retreat, a fragile bond began to form, a bond built on stolen glances, shared words, and the growing realization that they had found something precious and unexpected in each other. Rahim led Adara to a hidden cove, a secret place he had never shared with anyone. Sunlight filtered through the overhanging trees, dappling the sand with light and shadow. The air was still and quiet, filled only with the gentle murmur of the waves. He gestured for her to sit beside him on a smooth, sun-warmed rock. "This island has been my refuge for many years," he said, his voice low and quiet. "A place where I can escape the burdens of leadership, the weight of the world." He paused, picking up a small, smooth stone and turning it over in his hands. "I was not always the man you see now, Adara. I was once different." He spoke of his childhood, of growing up in the shadow of his father, a powerful and ambitious ruler. He spoke of the constant pressure to prove himself, the endless training in warfare and strategy. He spoke of the rivalries and intrigues that plagued the court, the constant threat of betrayal and violence. "My father taught me that strength was the only virtue, that mercy was a weakness," Rahim continued, his voice tinged with sadness. "He believed that fear was the only way to maintain order, to keep our enemies at bay." He told her of the day his father died, assassinated by a rival clan. He spoke of the chaos that followed, the struggle for power, the threat of a war. He was still young, barely a man, but he was thrust into leadership, forced to take on the mantle of power before he was ready. "I had to make a choice, Adara," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "I could choose the path of peace, the path of mercy, and risk losing everything, or I could embrace the lessons my father had taught me and rule with an iron fist." He sighed, the weight of his past heavy on his shoulders. "I chose the latter. I built a wall around myself, a mask of ruthlessness to protect myself and my people. I became the Sheik they feared, the man they whispered about in hushed tones." He looked away, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I wonder if I made the right choice. I wonder if the price of power was too high." Adara listened patiently, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She saw the pain in his eyes, the weariness in his voice. She understood the burden he carried, the sacrifices he had made. "You did what you thought was best, Rahim," she said softly. "You protected your people. You maintained peace. That is not a weakness. It is a strength." Her words, simple and sincere, touched him deeply. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. He had never spoken of these things to anyone before, had never allowed himself to be so vulnerable. But with Adara, it felt different. He felt safe, understood. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Thank you, Adara," he whispered, "for listening, for understanding." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The air grew cooler, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. Rahim turned to Adara, his gaze intense. "You see me, Adara," he said, his voice low and husky. "You see the man beneath the mask." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "And you do not fear me." Adara met his gaze, her heart beating faster. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the longing in his touch. She saw the man she had glimpsed in the Falcon's clearing, the man who was capable of tenderness and compassion. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised even her, that she did not fear him. She trusted him. He gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions, the silence charged with anticipation. The mask had slipped, and in that moment of shared vulnerability, their attraction deepened, a fragile flower blooming in the hidden cove. Adara's heart felt heavy. Yassir's words echoed in her mind, a dissonant counterpoint to the quiet intimacy she had found with Rahim. She remembered the stories of the Sheik's ruthlessness, the tales that had once filled her with fear. Had she been foolish to believe that the man she had seen on the island, the man who cared for the injured falcon and shared her love of poetry, was the true Rahim? Or was that simply a facade, a carefully crafted illusion designed to deceive her? She wandered along the beach, the waves lapping at her feet, the sand cool beneath her toes. The beauty of the island, once a source of solace, now seemed to mock her confusion. She closed her eyes, trying to reconcile the conflicting images of Rahim in her mind. The fearsome Sheik of legend, the man who inspired terror in the hearts of his enemies, and the gentle, thoughtful man she had come to know, the man who had shared his vulnerability, his secrets, his dreams. She thought of their conversations, their shared laughter, the quiet intimacy they had found in each other's company. Had it all been a lie? Had Rahim been playing a role, pretending to be someone he was not? Doubt gnawed at her, a persistent whisper in her ear. She remembered Yassir's words of warning, his subtle insinuations about the dangers she faced. He had spoken of Rahim's past, of the ruthless acts he had committed to maintain his power. Were those stories true? Was she truly safe in this isolated paradise, alone with a man whose true nature she might not even know? She began to question her own judgment, her own perceptions. Had she been blinded by the beauty of the island, by the unexpected connection she had found with Rahim? Had she allowed herself to be seduced by his charm, by the illusion of safety and intimacy he had created? She looked towards the Sheik's quarters, a flicker of fear in her eyes. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. He was nowhere to be seen. She felt a pang of loneliness, a sense of isolation that was both physical and emotional. She was alone on this island, with her doubts and fears, unsure of whom to trust, unsure of what to believe. The island, once a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping her in a web of uncertainty. The gentle whisper of doubt had grown into a roar, threatening to consume her, to shatter the fragile peace she had found. Torn between the glimpses of the kind man she had come to know and the terrifying tales spun by Yassir, Adara felt lost and afraid. The weight of her decision, the choice between love and duty, pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Despite the fear that gnawed at her, a small voice of defiance whispered in Adara's heart. She would not let fear cripple her. She would not let Yassir's words, his insidious whispers, poison the fragile trust she had begun to build with Rahim. She would seek the truth for herself. She began by revisiting the stories Yassir had told her. She replayed his words in her mind, searching for inconsistencies, for any hint of fabrication. She focused on the details, the specific events he had described, the names he had mentioned. She realized that while Yassir had spoken of Rahim's ruthlessness in general terms, he had been vague about specifics. He had painted a picture of a cruel and merciless ruler, but he had offered little concrete evidence to support his claims. Adara decided to speak to the island's servants, the men and women who had served Rahim for many years. They would know the truth about their master, she reasoned. They would have witnessed his actions, his interactions with others. They would be able to confirm or deny Yassir's stories. She approached the Sheik's personal attendant, a kind-faced older woman named Fatima, who had been with Rahim since he was a child. Adara chose her words carefully, hesitant to reveal her doubts and fears. She asked about Rahim's past, about his reputation, about the stories that were told about him on the mainland. Fatima listened patiently, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She confirmed that Rahim had a fearsome reputation, that he was known for his strength and his unwavering resolve. But she also spoke of his kindness, his compassion for his people, his deep love for the island and its creatures. "The Sheik carries a heavy burden, Adara," Fatima said, her voice low and gentle. "He has made difficult choices that have hardened his heart, but he is not the monster some people believe him to be." Fatima paused, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "There are secrets on this island, Adara," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Secrets that the Sheik has kept hidden for many years. Secrets that could change everything." She looked at Adara, her eyes filled with a mixture of warning and encouragement. "If you truly seek the truth, you must be brave. You must be willing to look beyond the surface, to uncover what lies beneath." Fatima's words ignited a spark of determination in Adara's heart. She knew that the search for truth might be dangerous, that it might lead her down a path she would rather not travel. But she was no longer willing to live in fear and uncertainty. She would find the truth, no matter the cost. She would unravel the secrets of the island, and in doing so, she would discover the true nature of the man she had married. Yasir sought Adara out the following morning, finding her sketching the intricate patterns of a seashell on a piece of parchment. He sat beside her, his manner solicitous, his voice laced with concern. "You seem troubled, Adara," he observed, his eyes searching her face. "The island life, perhaps it is not agreeing with you." Adara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She simply shook her head, a non-committal gesture. "It is different from what I'm used to." Yasir seized upon her hesitation. "Different indeed," he echoed, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And perhaps dangerous." He leaned closer, as if sharing a confidential secret. "Rahim has not always been the man you see now, Adara. He has a past." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He then proceeded to weave a tale of Rahim's supposed ruthlessness, a story far more elaborate and chilling than any he had told before. He spoke of a young woman, a beautiful dancer from a neighboring kingdom, who had captured Rahim's attention. He claimed that Rahim had showered her with gifts and promises, only to cast her aside when he tired of her affections. He described the dancer's heartbreak, her descent into despair, and her eventual disappearance, hinting darkly at Rahim's involvement. "No one knows for certain what became of her," Yasir said, his voice hushed and ominous. "But there were whispers, rumors of a tragic accident, a fall from the cliffs, or perhaps something more sinister." He watched Adara closely, gauging her reaction. He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, the tightening of her lips. He pressed his advantage. "Rahim is a man of powerful passions, Adara. He can be charming, seductive, but also volatile, dangerous. He has a history of discarding those who no longer serve his purpose." He reached out and touched her hand, his touch light but lingering. "Be careful, Adara. Do not let yourself be deceived by his charm. He is not the man you think he is." He then fabricated another story, this one about a loyal advisor who had served Rahim's father for many years. He claimed that the advisor had questioned Rahim's methods, his ruthlessness, and had dared to challenge his authority. Yasir described how Rahim, in a fit of rage, had banished the old man to the desert, leaving him to die of thirst and exposure. "Rahim does not tolerate dissent, Adara," Yasir said, his voice cold and hard. "He demands absolute loyalty, absolute obedience, and those who cross him, they pay a heavy price." He rose to his feet, his expression grave. I tell you these things not to frighten you, Adara, but to warn you. You are a kind and gentle soul. You do not belong in this world of shadows and whispers. You would be safer back in your village, surrounded by the people who love you." He bowed his head slightly, and then turned and walked away, leaving Adara alone with her doubts and fears. The seeds of suspicion he had planted had taken root, growing into a tangled web of anxiety and uncertainty. The beauty of the island, the gentle murmur of the waves, the warmth of the sun on her skin, none of it could dispel the chilling effect of Yassir's words. The image of the kind and gentle Rahim she had begun to know was fading, replaced by the spectre of a ruthless and dangerous man, a man capable of unspeakable acts. Rahim knew Yassir. He knew his cousin's subtle manipulations, his whispers of doubt, his carefully crafted lies. He had seen Yassir at work before, poisoning the minds of others, turning friends into enemies, all to further his own ambitions. He knew that Yassir was trying to drive a wedge between him and Adara, and the knowledge filled him with a cold, hard anger. He watched Adara from a distance, saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, the subtle shift in her demeanor. He knew that Yassir's words had taken root, that the seeds of doubt had been sown, and he knew that he had to act to protect Adara from his cousin's insidious influence. But how could he reveal the truth without exposing his own vulnerability, without shattering the carefully constructed facade of ruthlessness that had protected him and his empire for so long? He had built his reputation on fear, on the image of a man who was unyielding, unbreakable, to reveal his true feelings for Adara, to show his tenderness, his affection, would be to show weakness, to invite challenge, to risk everything he had built. He struggled with the conflict within him, the battle between love and duty. He longed to reassure Adara, to hold her close, to tell her that Yassir's words were lies, that he would never harm her. But he held back, his fear of exposing his vulnerability outweighing his desire to comfort her. He withdrew emotionally, creating a distance between them that he hoped would protect her from the storm that was brewing. He became the Sheik once more, the aloof and distant ruler, the man of iron. He spoke to her in formal tones, his voice devoid of warmth, his eyes guarded and unreadable. He avoided her gaze, afraid that she would see the turmoil within him, the fear that gnawed at his soul. He spent his days alone, walking along the cliffs, staring out at the endless expanse of sea. He wrestled with his emotions, the conflicting desires that tore at him. He wanted to be the man Adara deserved, the man she had glimpsed beneath the mask. But he also knew that he had a responsibility to his people, to his empire. He could not afford to show weakness, to let his personal feelings jeopardize the delicate balance of power he had so carefully maintained. He thought of the threats that surrounded him, the rival clans that watched his every move, waiting for any sign of vulnerability, any opportunity to challenge his authority. He thought of Yassir, his own cousin, plotting and scheming in the shadows, eager to seize power for himself. He knew that if he showed any sign of weakness, if he allowed his enemies to see the man beneath the mask, they would pounce, tearing his empire apart, destroying everything he held dear. So he continued to play the role of the fearsome Sheik, the man of iron, even as his heart ached for Adara, even as he longed to break down the wall he had built around himself. He hoped that by maintaining his facade of ruthlessness, he could protect her, shield her from the dangers that lurked in the shadows. But in doing so, he pushed her away, creating a chasm between them that threatened to swallow them both. The wall of fear he had erected to protect his empire had become a prison, trapping him in a world of loneliness and isolation, separating him from the woman he was coming to love. Sleep eluded Adara. The moon cast long skeletal shadows across the room, transforming familiar objects into menacing shapes. Yassir's words echoed in her ears, each tale a poisoned barb twisting in her heart. She tossed and turned, the silken sheets a tangled mess around her. Had she been a fool? Had she mistaken kindness for cunning, vulnerability for a carefully crafted performance? She remembered the warmth of Rahim's hand in hers, the gentle brush of his fingers against her cheek. She recalled the quiet intimacy of their shared poems, the easy laughter that had filled the air. Those moments, once so precious, now seemed tainted, distorted by the shadow of doubt. Could those memories be real if the man who created them was a lie? She rose from the bed and walked to the window, the cool night air a welcome relief against her burning skin. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery path across the restless sea. The island, once a haven, now felt like a prison, its beauty a cruel mockery of her confinement. She thought of her village, of the familiar faces, the simple routines, the comforting rhythm of the waves against the shore. There, she had known who she was, what she believed. Here, everything was uncertain, shifting like the sands beneath her feet. She was adrift in a sea of doubt, tossed between conflicting currents of fear and hope. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had she traded the safety of her simple life for a dangerous illusion? The tribal council had chosen her for her purity, her innocence. But what good was purity in a world of deceit and manipulation? What protection did innocence offer against a man who wore ruthlessness like a cloak? She thought of her father, his weathered hands calloused from years of mending nets, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. What would he say if he could see her now, trapped on this island, married to a man shrouded in darkness? He would tell her to come home, to return to the safety of their village, to the familiar embrace of her family. But could she simply leave? Could she turn her back on the fragile hope that had blossomed between her and Rahim, the glimpses of goodness she had seen beneath his hardened exterior? Had she misjudged him so completely? Was the tenderness she had witnessed merely a cruel deception, a calculated performance designed to win her trust? The weight of her decision pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. She was torn between the desire to flee, to return to the safety of her former life, and the lingering hope that the man she had come to love was not the monster Yassir had described. She longed for clarity, for guidance, for some sign that would show her the right path, but the only answer she found was the relentless pounding of the waves against the shore, a rhythmic reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. The moon climbed higher in the sky, casting its pale light on the troubled face of the Sheik's young bride, a woman caught between love and duty, between hope and fear, between the whispers of the past and the promise of a future she could no longer see. Adara's search for the truth led her to a hidden cavern on the island, a place shrouded in secrecy. The entrance, concealed behind a waterfall, was almost impossible to find unless you knew exactly where to look. Fatima, the Sheik's attendant, had given her the key, a small, intricately carved wooden bird that fit perfectly into a hidden lock in the rocks. Inside, the air was cool and damp, the silence broken only by the drip of water from the cavern roof. Torches flickered in wall sconces, casting eerie shadows that danced across the rough-hewn walls. The cavern was large, its depths shrouded in darkness. As Adara's eyes adjusted to the dim light, she began to see stacks of crates and barrels, piled high against the walls. The air was thick with the scent of spices, silks, and something else, something unfamiliar and slightly unsettling. She moved deeper into the cavern, her heart pounding in her chest. She examined the crates, their markings unfamiliar. She opened one and found it filled with bolts of fine silk, far more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. She opened another and found it filled with exotic spices, their pungent aroma filling the air. She continued her exploration, a growing sense of unease settling over her. This was no ordinary storage cavern. Finally, in a far corner, she found what she was looking for, a small wooden chest tucked away behind a stack of barrels. She lifted the lid and found it filled with ledgers and documents, bound in leather and secured with intricate clasps. She recognized Rahim's distinctive handwriting on some of the documents, but the majority of the writing was in a complex code she couldn't decipher. She carried the chest back to her quarters, her mind racing. What was Rahim hiding? What secrets did these ledgers contain? She spent hours poring over the documents, trying to make sense of the coded messages. She realized that the ledgers detailed shipments of goods coming in and out of the island, shipments that were not officially recorded, shipments that hinted at something illegal, something clandestine. As she studied the documents, a pattern began to emerge. The coded entries corresponded to dates and times and to specific locations on the mainland. She recognized some of the locations as ports and trading hubs, places known for their less than reputable activities. A chilling realization began to dawn on her. Could Rahim be involved in smuggling? Could the fearsome Sheik, the man who projected an image of unwavering justice, be secretly profiting from illegal activities? Just as she began to piece together the fragments of information, a knock at the door startled her. She quickly closed the chest, her heart pounding in her chest. It was Rahim. He entered the room, his expression grave. "Adara," he began, his voice low and serious. "I need to speak with you." He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "There are things you need to know." He confessed that he had been allowing the smuggling operation to continue, but not for personal gain. He explained that he had been using the smugglers to gather intelligence on his enemies, to uncover plots and conspiracies that threatened his empire. He had allowed them to operate under his name, using his fearsome reputation as a cover to gain access to information that would otherwise be unavailable to him. Before Adara could fully process this revelation, another knock echoed through the room. This time it was Yasir. He strode into the room, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of triumph and malice. "Rahim," he said, his voice dripping with accusation, "I have uncovered your treachery. You have been consorting with smugglers, using your position to enrich yourself at the expense of your people. You are a traitor." He gestured to the guards who stood behind him. "Seize him!" Rahim stood his ground, his face a mask of controlled fury. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but Yasir cut him off. "Do not try to deny it." "Rahim," he sneered, "the evidence is overwhelming. The ledgers, the coded messages, they all point to your guilt." He turned to Adara, his eyes filled with feigned concern. "You see, Adara, I warned you. I told you he was not what he seemed. He is a liar, a cheat, a traitor." Just as Yasir's guards moved to apprehend Rahim, Adara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a newfound determination. "Wait!" she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. She held up the chest, its leather binding worn and cracked. "I have been studying these ledgers, Yasir," she said, her voice calm and steady, "and I have discovered something interesting." She opened the chest and pulled out a sheaf of documents, her fingers tracing the intricate lines of the coded messages. "I have deciphered your code, Yasir," she continued, her gaze fixed on her husband's cousin, "and it tells a very different story." She pointed to a specific entry in the ledger, her finger tracing the lines of the coded message. "This entry," she said, her voice rising with each word, "details a shipment of weapons, not spices or silks. Weapons destined for a rival clan, a clan that has been plotting against Rahim for years." She turned to Rahim, her eyes filled with a mixture of apology and admiration. "You were right, Rahim," she said softly. "You were using the smugglers to gather intelligence, but it was not you who was betraying your people. It was Yasir." She looked at Yasir, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "You were using the smuggling operation to arm your own allies, to undermine Rahim's authority, to seize power for yourself." Adara's intuition, a quiet but persistent voice within her, told her that Yassir's stories didn't ring true. The Rahim she had come to know, the man who had shown her kindness and vulnerability, didn't match the monster Yassir described. She decided to investigate, to search for evidence of these supposed past atrocities. She began by questioning the island's staff. She spoke to the gardeners, the cooks, the stable hands, anyone who had been on the island for a long time. She asked them about Rahim, about his past, about his treatment of others. She phrased her questions carefully, trying not to arouse suspicion, presenting herself as a curious bride, simply interested in learning more about her husband's history. Most of the staff were hesitant to speak, their loyalty to Rahim evident. They offered polite but vague answers, praising his strength and wisdom, but revealing little about his past. A few, however, offered cryptic hints, veiled allusions to events that had taken place long ago. They spoke of a time of great unrest, of challenges to Rahim's authority, of difficult choices he had been forced to make. One elderly gardener, his hands gnarled and weathered from years of tending the island's lush vegetation, told her of a time when a group of disgruntled soldiers had attempted a mutiny. He said Rahim had dealt with the situation swiftly and decisively, but he refused to elaborate, his eyes clouding with a mixture of fear and sadness. A young stable hand, barely a man, spoke of a rival sheik who had challenged Rahim's rule. He said the rival sheik had disappeared mysteriously and that there were rumors of foul play, but he quickly added that he had only heard these stories second-hand, that he had no direct knowledge of what had happened. A kitchen maid, her face pale and drawn, whispered of a young woman, a beautiful dancer who had once captivated Rahim's attention. She said the dancer had vanished without a trace, and that there were whispers of a tragic accident, a fall from the cliffs. But she, too, claimed to have no first-hand knowledge of the event. These fragments of information, these whispers and rumors, only deepened Adara's confusion. They hinted at a darker side to Rahim, a side that he had kept hidden from her, but they also lacked substance, concrete evidence that would confirm Yassir's accusations. Adara decided to take a different approach. She knew that Rahim was a man of learning, a collector of books and ancient manuscripts. She began to spend her days in the island's small library, searching for any record of the events Yassir had described. She pored over dusty tomes, deciphering ancient scripts, searching for any mention of rebellions, disappearances, or acts of cruelty. She found accounts of political intrigues, of power struggles, of challenges to Rahim's authority. She found stories of battles fought and won, of treaties signed and broken, but she found no evidence of the specific atrocities Yassir had described. No mention of a banished advisor, no record of a missing dancer, no account of a brutal suppression. Of a rebellion. As she delved deeper into the island's history, a different picture of Rahim began to emerge. She found stories of his generosity, his compassion for his people, his dedication to justice and fairness. She found accounts of his efforts to improve the lives of his subjects, to promote education and trade, to build schools and hospitals. These discoveries strengthened her resolve. She began to believe that Yassir's stories were fabrications, deliberate attempts to undermine Rahim's authority and to drive a wedge between them. She realized that Yassir had a vested interest in painting Rahim as a ruthless tyrant, in creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. But why? What was Yassir's motive? What did he stand to gain from destroying her marriage, from undermining Rahim's rule? Adara knew that she was getting close to the truth, that the answers to these questions lay hidden somewhere on the island, waiting to be discovered. She just had to find them, and she would not rest until she did. Adara spent the following days lost in thought, turning Yassir's stories over and over in her mind. She paced the quiet halls of her quarters, the intricate patterns of the tiled floor a blur beneath her restless feet. Something about Yassir's account of the dancer's disappearance didn't sit right. The details were too perfect, too dramatic, too convenient. She remembered the dancer's name, a name Yassir had uttered with such feigned sorrow. Layla. Adara decided to ask Fatima about her. The older woman's eyes widened slightly when Adara mentioned the name, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. Layla? Yes, I remember her, Fatima said slowly. She was a beautiful dancer, full of life and laughter. She brought joy to the palace with her performances. Adara pressed further. Yassir said she disappeared, that there were rumors of an accident. Fatima sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. There were rumors, yes, but they were just that, rumors. Layla, she simply left. She returned to her family in the north. She missed her home, her people. She was not happy here. Adara's heart leapt. Yassir had lied. He had fabricated a tragic tale, a story designed to paint Rahim in a negative light. But why? What was his motive? She confided in Fatima, sharing her suspicions about Yassir, her growing belief that he was deliberately trying to undermine Rahim's authority. Fatima listened patiently, her wise eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. Yassir has always been ambitious, Fatima said, her voice low and quiet. He has always craved power. He resents Rahim's strength, his wisdom. He believes that he should be the one to rule. Fatima paused, choosing her words carefully. There are whispers, Adara, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Whispers of Yassir's involvement in unsavory activities, whispers of secret alliances, of deals made in the shadows. She looked at Adara, her eyes filled with a mixture of warning and encouragement. Be careful, Adara. The truth is a dangerous thing, but it is also a powerful weapon. If you seek it, you must be prepared for what you might find. Fatima's words confirmed Adara's suspicions. Yassir was not simply a concerned cousin. He was a manipulator, a schemer, a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his own ambitions. And he was using Adara, using her innocence and her vulnerability as a pawn in his game. Adara knew that she had to be careful, that she had to tread lightly, but she was no longer afraid. She had found an ally in Fatima, a source of wisdom and guidance, and she had a growing sense of her own strength, her own resilience. She would not be a pawn in Yassir's game. She would find the truth, and she would expose him for the liar and manipulator he was. The inconsistencies in Yassir's stories, the cryptic clues from Fatima, had ignited a fire in her heart, a burning desire to unravel the web of deceit that surrounded her, to uncover the truth that lay hidden in the shadows. Adara and Fatima met. In the cool stillness of the pre-dawn hours, the only light filtering through the narrow windows of the library. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices barely above a whisper, like conspirators plotting a secret rebellion. A bond of trust had formed between the young bride and the Sheik's loyal attendant, a bond forged in the shared desire for truth and justice. We must proceed with caution, Fatima warned, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for unseen listeners. Yassir has eyes and ears everywhere. He will be watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. Adara nodded, her expression resolute. I understand. But we cannot let fear paralyze us. We must find proof, concrete, evidence of Yassir's treachery, Fatima agreed. The ledgers are a start, she said, her gaze fixed on the wooden chest that sat between them on the table. But they are not enough. We need something more, something that will convince Rahim, something that will expose Yassir's true motives. They began by reviewing the information they had already gathered. They discussed the inconsistencies in Yassir's stories, the cryptic clues from the island staff, the rumors of his involvement in unsavory activities. They pieced together the fragments of information like a mosaic, searching for the missing pieces that would complete the picture. Fatima suggested they speak to some of the Sheik's most trusted advisors, men who had served him for many years. They may be reluctant to speak, she cautioned, but they may also hold the key to unlocking this mystery. Adara agreed. She knew that approaching these men would be risky, that it could expose their investigation and put them in danger. But she was willing to take the risk. She had come too far to turn back now. Over the next few days, Adara and Fatima met secretly with several of Rahim's advisors. They approached each one cautiously, carefully choosing their words, gauging their reactions. Some were hesitant to speak, their loyalty to Rahim unwavering, their fear of Yassir palpable. Others, however, sensing the sincerity of Adara's quest for truth, offered cryptic hints, veiled allusions to events that had taken place long ago. One advisor, an elderly man with a shrewd gaze and a sharp mind, spoke of a secret meeting he had witnessed between Yassir and a group of men from a rival clan. He said he had overheard them discussing a plan to destabilize Rahim's rule, to sow discord among the tribes, but he had been too afraid to speak up, fearing for his own safety. Another advisor, a younger man with a restless energy and a quick wit, spoke of Yassir's lavish lifestyle, his extravagant spending habits, his acquisition of valuable properties and businesses. He hinted that Yassir's wealth far exceeded his official income, suggesting that he was profiting from illegal activities. A third advisor, a woman with a calm demeanor and a piercing intellect, spoke of Yassir's manipulation of information, his subtle twisting of facts, his ability to create narratives that served his own purposes. She described how he had used rumors and innuendo to discredit Rahim's rivals, to undermine their authority, to consolidate his own power. As Adara and Fatima gathered more information, the picture of Yassir's treachery became clearer. They discovered that he had been systematically undermining Rahim's authority for years, using his position as advisor to sow discord, to spread misinformation, to create an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. He had been playing a long game, patiently building his own power base, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. They also discovered that Yassir was the mastermind behind the smuggling operation Adara had uncovered in the hidden cavern. He had been using the operation not only to enrich himself, but also to fund his clandestine activities, to buy the loyalty of key individuals, to further his own ambitions. Adara and Fatima documented every piece of information they gathered, carefully recording names, dates, locations, and details of conversations. They compiled a dossier of evidence, a damning indictment of Yassir's treachery. They knew that they were risking their lives, that if Yassir discovered their investigation, he would stop at nothing to silence them. But they were determined to see their mission through. They knew that the fate of the Sheikdom, the future of its people, rested on their ability to expose the truth. They had formed a secret alliance, a bond of loyalty and trust, and they would not rest until Yassir's treachery was revealed and justice was served. The whispers started with the gardener, old Salim, a man whose wrinkles held the island's secrets like lines on a map. He spoke of a hidden path, a place the Sheik visited alone, a place where the falcons didn't even fly. Adara, her heart, quickening with a mixture of fear and determination, pressed him further. Salim, reluctant at first, finally revealed a clue, a waterfall, hidden amongst the cliffs on the eastern side of the island, a waterfall that seemed to weep from solid rock. The next morning, Adara set out at sunrise, the sky a canvas of pale pinks and oranges. She followed a narrow, winding path that snaked through the dense foliage, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and salt spray. The path, overgrown and barely visible, led her upwards, towards the rocky cliffs that rose like jagged teeth against the sky. Finally, after what seemed like hours, she reached the waterfall Salim had described. It was a thin ribbon of water, cascading down a sheer rock face, disappearing into a pool of crystal-clear water below. Adara examined the rock face carefully, searching for any sign of an opening. She ran her hands over the cool, damp stone, her fingers tracing the crevices and fissures. She circled the pool, her eyes scanning the surrounding rocks. Finally, her fingers brushed against something smooth and wooden, hidden amongst the tangled vines that grew near the base of the waterfall. It was a small, intricately carved bird, barely larger than her thumb. She gently pulled on it, and a section of the rock face swung inwards, revealing a dark, narrow opening. Adara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the hidden cavern. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was cool and damp, the silence broken only by the drip of water from the cavern roof. The passageway was narrow, barely wide enough for her to pass through. After a few steps, it opened into a larger chamber, its depths shrouded in darkness. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw torches flickering in wall sconces, casting eerie shadows that danced across the rough-hewn walls. The cavern was vast, its ceiling lost in the darkness above. Stacks of crates and barrels lined the walls, their markings unfamiliar. The air was thick with the scent of spices, silks, and something else, something pungent and slightly metallic, that made her nose wrinkle. Adara moved cautiously through the cavern, her heart pounding in her chest. She examined the crates, their markings a jumble of symbols and numbers she couldn't understand. She opened one and found it filled with bolts of fine silk, their colors vibrant and rich. She opened another and found it filled with exotic spices, their aromas mingling in the air. She continued her exploration, a growing sense of unease settling over her. This was no ordinary storage cavern. In a far corner, she found a small wooden desk, its surface covered in dust. A single oil lamp flickered on the desk, casting a small circle of light. Adara approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the surrounding shadows. On the desk, she found a stack of ledgers bound in leather and secured with intricate clasps. She opened one, and her eyes widened. The pages were filled with columns of numbers and coded entries, dates and times, names of ships and locations. She recognized some of the locations as ports and trading hubs, places known for their less than reputable activities. She began to leaf through the other ledgers, her heart sinking with each page. The entries detailed shipments of goods, coming in and out of the island, shipments that were not officially recorded, shipments that hinted at smuggling, at illegal activities conducted under the Sheik's name. Adara's worst fears were confirmed. The man she had married, the man she had begun to trust, was not who he seemed. The cavern, a secret hidden beneath the island's idyllic surface, held the evidence of his deception. Adara's voice, though trembling slightly, resonated with newfound authority. The coded ledger, now unraveled by her skilled hand, lay open on the table, a stark testament to Yassir's betrayal. The guards, initially hesitant, looked to Rahim for guidance. The Sheik, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, stared at the intricate calligraphy that exposed his cousin's treachery. "These symbols," Adara explained, pointing to a specific section of the ledger, "represent shipments of weapons, not silks or spices, as Yassir claimed. These weapons were destined for the Jafari clan, our sworn enemies." She looked directly at Yassir, her gaze unwavering. "You have been using the Sheik's name, his reputation, to smuggle weapons to our enemies, weakening our defenses, lining your own pockets, and all the while painting Rahim as a ruthless tyrant to cover your own deceit." The guards, now understanding the gravity of the situation, shifted uneasily. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Yassir's carefully constructed facade of concern crumbled. His face, now pale and contorted with rage, betrayed his true nature. "Lies!" he spat, his voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. "This woman is a deceiver. She is trying to protect her husband, the true traitor." He made a grab for the ledger, attempting to snatch it from the table, but Adara was quicker. She pulled it back, clutching it to her chest. "The truth is here for all to see," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "The code is complex, but it does not lie." Rahim, finally regaining his composure, stepped forward. He looked at the guards, his voice resonating with authority. "Seize him," he commanded, his gaze fixed on Yassir. "He is a traitor to our people." Yassir, realizing that his game was up, made a desperate attempt to escape. He lunged towards the cavern entrance, hoping to disappear into the shadows, but the guards were too quick. They tackled him to the ground, restraining his struggles. He thrashed and cursed, his face contorted with rage and frustration, but it was too late. His treachery had been exposed. Rahim turned to Adara, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. "You have saved us, Adara," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You have uncovered the truth, and you have restored my honor." He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "I misjudged you, Adara. I let fear and doubt cloud my judgment. I should have trusted you from the beginning." Adara looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and love. The wall between them, the wall of fear and mistrust that Yassir had so carefully constructed, had finally crumbled. The truth had set them both free. The cavern, once a symbol of secrecy and deception, had become the place where their bond was forged anew, stronger and deeper than ever before. The revelation of Yassir's treachery had not only exposed a traitor, but had also revealed the true strength of Adara, the quiet calligrapher whose courage and intelligence had saved the Sheik and his empire. Adara clutched the leather-bound ledger, her knuckles white. She found Rahim in his study, the room filled with the scent of sandalwood and old parchment. He stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the restless sea. He looked weary, his shoulders slumped, the weight of leadership etched on his face. "Rahim," Adara began, her voice trembling slightly. He turned, his eyes questioning. She held up the ledger. "I found this in the cavern. I know about the smuggling." Rahim's face paled. He did not deny it. He simply nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. I can explain." He gestured for her to sit, and he sat opposite her, the heavy silence stretching between them. He told her of the threats he faced, the constant plots and conspiracies that threatened his rule. He explained that he had allowed the smuggling to continue, not for personal gain, but to gather intelligence on his enemies. He had used the smugglers as his eyes and ears, allowing them to operate under his name, using his fearsome reputation as a cover to gain access to information that would otherwise be unavailable to him. "It was a dangerous game, Adara," he admitted, his voice low and strained. "But I believed it was necessary to protect my people, to maintain peace in my land." He looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I know it was wrong, Adara. I know it was deceitful, but I had no other choice." Before Adara could respond, the door burst open. Yassir strode into the room, his face flushed with triumph, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Rahim," he announced, his voice ringing with accusation, "I have uncovered your treachery. You have been consorting with smugglers, using your position to enrich yourself at the expense of your people. You are a traitor!" He gestured to the two guards who stood behind him, their faces impassive. "Arrest him!" Rahim stood up, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Yassir, this is not what it seems." He began, but Yasir cut him off. "Do not try to deny it, Rahim," he sneered. "The evidence is irrefutable. The ledgers, the coded messages, they all point to your guilt." He turned to Adara, his eyes filled with feigned concern. "You poor girl," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I warned you. I told you he was not what he seemed. He is a liar, a cheat, a traitor." As the guards moved to seize Rahim, Adara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice surprisingly firm. She held up the ledger, its leather cover worn and cracked. "I have been studying this, Yasir," she said, her gaze unwavering, "and I have discovered something interesting." She laid the ledger on the table, her fingers tracing the lines of the coded messages. "This code," she explained, her voice gaining confidence with each word, "is not about silks or spices, it's about weapons." Her calligraphy skills, honed over years of practice, allowed her to see patterns where others saw only chaos. She had spent hours deciphering the intricate symbols, painstakingly piecing together the fragments of information, and now the truth was laid bare before her. "These symbols," she continued, pointing to a specific entry in the ledger, "represent shipments of weapons, not goods. Weapons destined for the Jafari clan, our sworn enemies, and these other symbols," she pointed to another section, "they represent payments, large sums of money paid to you, Yasir." The guards hesitated, their gazes shifting from Adara to Yasir, then back to Rahim. The Sheik stared at the ledger, his face a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Yasir's carefully crafted facade began to crumble. Yasir's face, a moment before smug and triumphant, now contorted in a mask of rage. He lunged for Adara, his hand outstretched, intent on silencing her, on snatching the damning ledger from her grasp. But Rahim, finally understanding the depth of his cousin's betrayal, moved with a speed that belied his usual quiet demeanor. He intercepted Yasir, gripping his arm with surprising force. "Enough, Yasir!" Rahim's voice, low and dangerous, echoed through the cavern. "Your treachery is exposed. You have used my name, my reputation, to further your own ambitions, to endanger my people." Yasir, trapped and exposed, thrashed like a cornered animal. "Lies, all lies," he screamed, his voice laced with desperation. "She is lying to protect you. You are the traitor, Rahim. You are the one who has betrayed our people." He struggled against Rahim's grip, his eyes darting towards the cavern entrance, a desperate plan of escape forming in his mind. He wrenched his arm free and bolted towards the narrow opening, hoping to disappear into the shadows. "Stop him!" Rahim roared, his voice echoing through the cavern. The guards, momentarily stunned by the sudden turn of events, sprang into action. They pursued Yasir, their footsteps echoing on the damp stone floor. The chase was short-lived. The cavern, though vast, offered few avenues of escape. Yasir, trapped between the pursuing guards and the sheer rock face, was quickly apprehended. He fought back, kicking and screaming, but the guards were too strong. They subdued him, binding his hands behind his back, silencing his frantic protests. He glared at Adara, his eyes burning with hatred. "You will regret this," he hissed, his voice venomous. "You will all regret this." Rahim returned to the main chamber, his face grim, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. He looked at Adara, his gaze softening as he took in her pale face and trembling hands. He reached out and gently took the ledger from her, his fingers brushing against hers. "Thank you, Adara," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. "You have saved me. You have saved us all." He turned to the assembled guards, his voice regaining its authority. "Take him to the dungeons," he commanded, his gaze fixed on the bound and struggling Yasir. "He will be held accountable for his crimes." As the guards led Yasir away, Rahim turned back to Adara. He took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "The truth is out now, Adara," he said, his voice low and steady. "The lies and the whispers can no longer harm us." He looked into her eyes, his gaze intense. "I built a wall around myself, Adara, a wall of fear and mistrust. I believed it was necessary to protect my people, to maintain my power, but I was wrong. True strength lies not in fear, but in trust. And you, Adara, you have shown me the true meaning of strength." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "You saw through the lies, you uncovered the truth. You had the courage to stand up for what you believed in, and in doing so, you not only saved me, but you also showed me the man I could be, the man I want to be." He raised her hands to his lips, kissing them gently. "Thank you, Adara," he whispered, "for your courage, for your wisdom, for your unwavering faith in me." The revelation of Yassir's treachery had not only exposed a traitor, but it had also shattered the carefully constructed facade of ruthlessness that Rahim had maintained for so long. The truth about his cruelty, the whispers and rumors that had haunted him for years, were finally revealed to be nothing more than the machinations of a jealous and ambitious cousin. The mask had fallen, revealing the true face of Sheik Rahim, a man of justice and compassion, a man worthy of the love and trust of the woman who had risked everything to uncover the truth. News of Yassir's treachery spread through the sheikdom, like wildfire carried on the desert winds, whispered in the bustling marketplaces and proclaimed from the minarets of the mosques. The carefully crafted image of Sheik Rahim, the ruthless tyrant, began to crumble, replaced by a new narrative, a story of a just ruler who had been betrayed by his own kin. Rahim, no longer hiding behind a mask of fear, addressed his people from the balcony of his palace. He spoke of the dangers he had faced, the threats to his rule, the difficult choices he had been forced to make. He confessed to his strategy of allowing the smuggling to continue, explaining how he had used it to gather intelligence, to uncover plots and conspiracies that threatened his people. He spoke of Yassir's betrayal, his cousin's greed and ambition, his willingness to sacrifice the well-being of the sheikdom for his own personal gain. He spoke with honesty and humility, acknowledging his own mistakes, his reliance on fear and intimidation. He pledged to rule with wisdom and compassion, to build a future based on trust and understanding, not on fear and repression. He promised to invest in education and infrastructure, to promote trade and prosperity, to create a sheikdom where justice and fairness prevailed. Adara stood beside him, her presence a silent testament to his transformation. She had not only uncovered Yassir's treachery, but she had also helped Rahim to see the error of his ways, to understand that true strength lay not in fear, but in compassion and justice. Her quiet strength, her unwavering faith in him, had given him the courage to reveal his true self, to embrace the man he was always meant to be. The people listened intently, their faces a mixture of surprise, relief, and hope. They had lived for so long under the shadow of the Sheik's fearsome reputation, and now they were witnessing a transformation, a rebirth. They saw a ruler who was not afraid to admit his mistakes, a ruler who was committed to serving his people with justice and compassion. They saw a future where fear no longer held sway, where trust and understanding could flourish. In the days that followed, Rahim began to dismantle the structures of fear he had built. He released political prisoners, pardoned those who had been unjustly accused, and reformed the harsh laws that had governed the sheikdom for so long. He established a council of elders, representing all the tribes, to advise him on matters of governance. He invested in education, building schools and libraries, promoting literacy and learning. He encouraged trade and commerce, creating opportunities for his people to prosper. Adara, with Rahim's full support, established a cultural center on the island, a place where artists, poets, and musicians could gather to create and share their work. She invited calligraphers, painters, and storytellers from across the land to come to the island, transforming it into a haven for creativity and expression. The island, once a symbol of Rahim's isolation and secrecy, became a symbol of his newfound openness and his commitment to the arts. He even reopened the Falcon Sanctuary, dedicating it to the preservation of these magnificent birds, a symbol of his rediscovered connection to the natural world. Their marriage, once a political arrangement, blossomed into a true partnership. They ruled together side by side, their strengths complementing each other. Rahim, with his wisdom and experience, guided the Sheikdom towards a future of peace and prosperity. Adara, with her compassion and artistic vision, nurtured the cultural heart of the land, fostering a sense of unity and shared identity. They traveled throughout the Sheikdom, meeting with the people, listening to their concerns, working together to build a better future for all. The clans, once divided by suspicion and fear, began to unite under their leadership. They saw in Rahim and Adara a new model of leadership, a model based on trust, respect, and a shared commitment to the common good. The Sheikdom flourished, its people united by a common purpose, their lives enriched by the arts and culture that Adara so passionately championed. And so, the tale of the feared sheikh and the pure calligrapher became a legend, a story told not to frighten children, but to inspire hope. A story of how love and trust could conquer fear and division, how compassion and justice could transform a land, how art and beauty could heal the wounds of the past and create a future filled with promise. The island, once a place of secrecy and shadows, became a beacon of light, a symbol of the transformative power of love, art, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The great square before the Sheikh's palace buzzed with anticipation. People from all corners of the Sheikdom had gathered, drawn by the news of Yasir's arrest and the rumors of a momentous announcement from Sheikh Rahim. They stood in hushed silence, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Rahim emerged onto the balcony, Adara at his side. He raised his hand, and the murmur of the crowd subsided. He spoke of Yasir's treachery, his cousin's secret dealings with their enemies, his attempt to undermine the Sheikdom from within. He spoke of the smuggling operation, explaining that he had allowed it to continue not for personal gain, but as a means of gathering intelligence, of uncovering the plots and conspiracies that threatened their safety. He admitted that he had used his fearsome reputation, the image of a ruthless tyrant, as a shield, a deterrent to those who would seek to harm his people. "I know that many of you feared me," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I know that the stories told about me painted a picture of a cruel and merciless ruler, and I understand why. I cultivated that image. I allowed those stories to spread, because I believed it was the only way to keep our enemies at bay, to protect our land from those who would seek to destroy it." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "But I was wrong. Fear is a fragile foundation. It breeds mistrust, suspicion, and division. True strength lies not in fear, but in trust, in justice, in compassion." He turned to Adara, his eyes filled with gratitude. "My wife, Adara, has shown me the error of my ways. Her courage, her wisdom, her unwavering faith in me has opened my eyes to a different path, a path of justice and mercy." He took Adara's hand, holding it up for all to see. "I stand before you today, not as the sheikh you feared, but as a man who has learned from his mistakes. I pledge to rule not with an iron fist, but with an open heart. I pledge to serve you, the people of this Sheikdom, with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering dedication to justice and fairness." He spoke of his plans for the future, his vision of a Sheikdom united not by fear, but by shared purpose and mutual respect. He spoke of investing in education, in infrastructure, in creating opportunities for all to prosper. He spoke of building a future where every voice could be heard, where every individual could reach their full potential. The crowd listened intently, their faces reflecting a growing sense of hope. They had come expecting a display of power, a reaffirmation of the Sheik's authority. Instead, they witnessed a display of vulnerability, a confession of past mistakes, a promise of a new beginning. Adara, standing beside Rahim, felt a surge of pride and affection. She had seen the man beneath the mask, the man of kindness and compassion that Yassir's lies had tried to conceal. And now, the world was seeing him too. Her unwavering faith in him, her courage in uncovering the truth, had not only saved him from his enemies, but it had also liberated him from the prison of his own making. As Rahim finished speaking, a wave of applause erupted from the crowd, a spontaneous expression of relief and renewed hope. The sound echoed through the square, a testament to the transformative power of truth, a celebration of a new beginning. Adara's hand tightened in Rahim's, a silent affirmation of their shared commitment to a future where justice, compassion, and trust would prevail. The clans, once divided by fear and suspicion, now stood united, their trust in their sheikh solidified by the woman who stood at his side, a woman whose purity of heart had revealed the true heart of their leader. The whispers of the feared sheikh. Rahim faded, replaced by tales of a just and compassionate ruler. His name, once spoken with trepidation, was now uttered with respect and even affection. The transformation was gradual, a slow but steady shift in perception, fueled by Rahim's consistent actions and Adara's unwavering support. They worked together, a true partnership forged in the crucible of deception and betrayal. Rahim, guided by his newfound understanding of justice and mercy, implemented reforms that touched every corner of the sheikhdom. He established fair trade practices, ensuring that merchants and farmers alike received just compensation for their goods. He invested in infrastructure, building roads and bridges that connected remote villages to the bustling cities, fostering trade and communication. He established schools and libraries, promoting literacy and learning, empowering his people with knowledge and skills. Adara, with Rahim's full support, spearheaded cultural initiatives that celebrated the rich diversity of the sheikhdom. She organized festivals and exhibitions, showcasing the talents of artists, musicians, and storytellers from every tribe. She established workshops and academies, providing opportunities for young people to develop their artistic skills. She encouraged the preservation of ancient traditions, ensuring that the stories and songs of their ancestors were passed down to future generations. She believed that art and culture could bridge divides, foster understanding, and create a sense of shared identity. Rahim reopened his private island, transforming it into a sanctuary for both falcons and artists. He established a falcon hospital, where injured birds were cared for and rehabilitated before being released back into the wild. He also built studios and workshops for artists, providing them with a peaceful and inspiring environment to create their work. The island, once a symbol of his isolation and secrecy, became a haven for creativity and healing, a testament to his newfound balance of power and compassion. Their marriage, once a political arrangement, blossomed into a deep and enduring love. They found solace in each other's company, a refuge from the pressures of leadership. They shared quiet evenings, reading poetry, discussing art, and walking hand in hand along the beach, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. They learned from each other, challenged each other, and supported each other through every trial and triumph. Rahim learned from Adara the power of compassion and the importance of listening to the voices of his people. Adara learned from Rahim the complexities of leadership and the delicate balance between strength and mercy. The clans, once divided by suspicion and rivalry, began to unite under their shared leadership. They saw in Rahim and Adara a model for a new era, an era of peace and prosperity built on trust, respect, and a shared commitment to the common good. Trade flourished, the arts thrived, and the Sheikdom entered a golden age of cultural and economic growth. The story of the feared Sheik and the pure calligrapher became a beloved tale, a story told not to frighten children, but to inspire hope. It was a story of transformation, of how love and trust could conquer fear and division, how compassion and justice could heal a wounded land, how art and beauty could create a future filled with promise. And at the heart of that story was the island, once a place of shadows and secrets, now a beacon of light, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a symbol of the transformative power of love.